It's 6 o'clock. Welcome to the meeting. And before I start, I think I have been told that remind the members and the officer if they speak and just switch on, and then also when they finish they switch off the microphones. There are other, I think there are other instructions, but I think that's not relevant anymore. Is that right? The officers are going to speak from where? There is the reporting officer, so
yes, Chair. All the reporting officers are back, so when they're ready to speak,
yeah,
they need to come to one of the microphones. There are two on either side of the table there. Yeah. They speak, and then obviously they leave this way, just to keep the one-way system.
That's a one-way system. Shall we make a start? Apologies for absence.
None, Chair.
The minutes of the meeting of 27th of April and on the 18th of May. Are there any issues, matter arising from that? No? Agree to sign? Okay, thank you. 106, local government?
None, Chair.
No. Disclosure of interest. Urgent business.
None, Chair.
Okay. Reference from other committees.
None, Chair.
Okay. Seven. It's about redundancies. Oh, Denise Morgan. Okay, I can move on to the next one. That's the changes to complaints management due to new housing ombudsman powers and complaints handling code. Who is presenting this report?
That's myself.
Okay, Sarah, yeah.
Sorry, technology. You see, I'm not very good with technology. Okay, if I just get to the right page. Okay, so the reason I'm here tonight is to introduce a report to you regarding the changes to the complaints management in housing at the council due to some changes to the Housing Ombudsman Service. The Housing Ombudsman Service is a specialist ombudsman service for our service, although we do have some involvement with the local government ombudsman. There have been a number of bits of legislation that have been introduced and brought through because of the the tragic fire at Grenfell, and the changes to the Housing Ombudsman Service and the complaints is because of that. So what the government have done is they have strengthened the powers of the local government, of the Housing Ombudsman, so that we have, they're much tighter in the way that they deal with our complaints. And in addition to that, they've discussed with the Housing Ombudsman the fact that that there were some issues prior to that with some of the respondents. So what the Housing Ombudsman have done is they've introduced a complaints handling code. And I've gone through in here, which in a little bit of detail, providing the kind of things that is going to do. So it provides some consistency around complaints handling. It provides some fixed timescales. It's prescriptive in some matters, but not so in others. It has a defined definition of complaints. And it says to us we have to follow this, and we have to have a specific framework that we work within. So we also had a requirement to do a self-assessment by the 31st of December last year, which we did, which is actually in this pack. So one of the things that they can do is they can actually have these new things called complaints handling orders for compliance and notices in advance if local authorities or other housing organisations don't comply with them. So our self-assessment did show that we met the vast majority of the requirements of the Housing Ombudsman scheme, but there were a few little bits that we needed to work on. One of them was the fact that the council's complaints definition does not meet not quite the definition of the Housing Ombudsman, but on the main it's the same kind of thing. But what we've agreed is that we would propose that we would put forward the Housing Ombudsman complaint definition instead. In addition, we're also going to have to make some changes to our timescales to meet the Housing Ombudsman. They're a little bit tighter than the existing council ones, and that will just apply for housing. And then there will be some changes in practices for the way that we work. So it's around additional training for staff, it's around more engagement with the complainants during the process of responding to the complaint. And we have got to do a lot more involvement with our tenants as well. We have tenant board and scrutiny panel anyway, we provide an annual report, but there's a big emphasis around learning from complaints. So that's something we're looking at as well. One of the new things is as well, it's around a compensation policy. So we have put together a compensation policy which we will have to publish. And that basically looks at the kind of remedies that we would have for service failure or other things that would affect people adversely. So we've put this together and it is based on the good practice that the Ombudsman have provided themselves. Plus it's also based on looking at other local authorities and housing associations to see what they do. So the levels we're talking about are the levels that are, about, if you like, the market level for those. So I've included some appendices in here. What we're asking for is, we're asking for your agreement to the proposed amendments to the complaints procedure because of the Housing Ombudsman changes and the complaints handling code, so that we ensure that we're compliant with the new rules. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Bain.
I have. Two questions. Is there a reason why the shortened timescales for dealing with complaints is only going to be applied to housing? Why shouldn't it be something common across all complaints with the council? That's the first. The second question is, does this apply to both council-owned properties and housing associations?
I'll take the second one first. Yes. All landlords over a certain size. Yes, it does apply to housing associations and local authorities if they have a housing stock of a certain size. I think the de minimis is only about 1,000 units, so the council is well within that. In terms of the reporting timescales, we've had discussions with the complaints team and they're happy with the corporate timescales, but obviously they recognise the fact that we do have to change our timescales very slightly for the housing complaints.
Okay, thank you. I'd have been happier if they'd all been the same, just for the sake of simplicity.
Sorry, why that doesn't apply to other services? There is another, I think, the advice at early stage. So what early stage you mean by that? Right of residents to actually have early help or advice and support.
complaint, then it has to go through this process.
Referring to the head of housing, that's at early stage, or what stage you will refer
No,
that?
usually what will happen with a complaint is when it comes in, it will normally be dealt with by a manager within the service. If, say, for example, a complaint came in regarding the actions of a housing officer, it would normally come into the team leader or the manager of that service who would do the first stage. And the second stage would either be their manager or it would be myself.
Are you the nominated complaint officer?
Sorry?
Are you nominated complaint officer?
No, not at the moment, but we are actually looking to bring in nominated complaints officers. There are nominated complaints officers in some parts of the service, but not in my part at the moment, but that's something we're working on.
Is there any other question? Yeah.
Thank you for your report. I just wanted to ask, so I see that obviously stage 1 is around 10 working days and stage 2 is 20 working days. And at each stage, you're saying that obviously if it's not met within that time frame, a formal, obviously, reply notice has to be sent. But is there something in place, or is there someone that's going to be checking that, making sure that most of the complaints come in are handled in that time frame? Like, obviously, if we get like 20 complaints and 18 of them are later than the working days, then obviously there's not much point.
Again. The business intelligence team manage the complaints process, and they send out regular reports to us. They're also introducing a new complaints management system, which will enable a lot of that to be automated. So, and we do, obviously, within the service, we do diarise and make a note of complaints as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The appointment of these operators, these officers for complaints officers, when will that be in place? Because that seems to be a central part of the report's requirements.
They're in place for two parts of the service already. They're in place for BTS and for housing needs. We just need to get somebody in place, one in place for the housing operations side. And in the meantime, I'm, if you like, performing that role.
Any more questions, comments? Does the committee approve the proposed recommendations?
Approved, Chair.
Agree?
Yes, agreed, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's me, thank you. Thanks, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek your approval today for a restructure of the Alternative Learning and Progression Service. So there's an organisational change document attached to Appendix A, and it sets out the rationale for configuration of our Alternative Learning and Progression Service, which is our local authority behaviour type service that deals with pupils who've been permanently excluded from school or pupils who can't attend school because of medical reasons. And also reconfiguration of responsibility between that service and also our pupil referral unit, which is basically like a school, but it's where children who've been permanently excluded usually attend that alternative that pupil referral unit, which is called ACE, or the Avenue Centre for Education. So this report is all about reconfiguration of responsibilities between our local authority service and our pupil referral unit. We have consulted all parties, all staff and unions on the proposal, and all questions have been responded to. And feedback from the consultation is that staff understood the reasons for the proposed restructure and no alternative proposals have been put forward. Job descriptions have been updated and been to job evaluation panel to ensure the focus of each role is clear moving forward. The full proposals are set out at paragraph 16 of the report. There is one employee at risk of redundancy and they've been placed on the council's redeployment list. The proposal does result in a saving of just under £70,000, but that saving is to the dedicated schools grant rather than the council's general fund because the service sits within that particular funding stream. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I understood the report, I think, but I would just like a view. Do you consider that the report is putting forward something that will be an improvement in service? Because it didn't strike me that there was anything in there that would suggest it was going to be an improvement. I only ask because too often, in my opinion, we have recently been seeing services reduced in almost every respect to do with children. And I'd like to be reassured that this was actually going to be an improvement.
Yep, I can answer that question. So I believe it is an improvement because the main thrust of this approach is to reconfigure services so that children who can't be in school because of their behaviour or their needs around their behaviour are managed by a registered school rather than by a local authority service. They are much better placed to manage children out of school than our small local authority team. It ensures consistency of practice, it ensures better oversight of children in that position, and it also places us in a better position in terms of any Ofsted inspection. So I believe this is a really important change. It's not a massive kind of money saving in any way. Yes, there's some people moving around the system. It's one post that's being reduced. The post is one day a week. It's a historical post that we no longer need. But the main thrust of this is not about reducing size of teams or saving money. It's about better setting up our support services for children who can't be in school to make sure we have better oversight and better systems around them.
Thank you. I'm reassured by that. The main thing, as far as I'm concerned, is you said it was to do as well with a better ability to meet Ofsted requirements. We haven't done too well with Ofsted reports recently, have we? But if this is the case, do you really think that it is going to make a difference? Because I do understand how difficult it is with excluded children. I'd just like to be sure, absolutely sure, that they're being treated better as a result of this change, not worse.
Yep. Our pupil referral unit called ACE is rated good by Ofsted. It manages our children, our most challenging children, very, very effectively. So we are confident, and Caroline's a Senior School Improvement Advisor behind me. We're both very confident that this is actually the right thing to do by the children, and that by placing them under the oversight of the pupil referral unit, who are much, much better set up to manage and have many more resources at their disposal to better manage, put together really creative packages to engage pupils who face the greatest challenge really in reintegrating back into education. So we quite passionately believe that this is the right thing to do for those children.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Consultation and the feedback. Can you explain a little more? Because I'm very confused about the feedback. I think they are explained or consulted?
Yeah, we did a good consultation with the team both before the OCA was launched and then obviously when the OCA was launched and with the unions and so on. So the team understand the rationale for this change. They are on board with that change, and 2 members of the team are moving over to our pupil referral unit, to ACE, to do that work in ACE. So there's some continuity there as well. So there wasn't any alternative proposals put forward. People didn't object to the proposal. So again, we've tried to bring the whole team with us on this approach, and they've brought into that.
Are they happy, or what resentments or any issues around that?
Obviously, we've got one person being made redundant, which is really unfortunate, and we try to avoid that. She works 1 day a week for us at the moment. Her role is very historic. But again, she understands the reason behind that, although nobody obviously wants to put themselves forward for redundancy. But the rest of the team are on board with that. There's no big issues. We've changed some job descriptions. We've been through that process. We've consulted with staff. We've really tried to work with them. So I think the team are, I'm confident the team are on board with this proposal.
The question is, does this also involve the home tuition, homeschooling?
So we still got our requirement to do our schooling for medical tuition. So those children that can't go to school because they have a medical condition that prevents them from going. So our Alternative Learning Progression Service will still oversee the education for those children, but crucially, those children are on the roll of their school. So yeah, they're on the roll of a mainstream school, or a special school indeed, and that school also has oversight of those pupils along with this service. So we still have that home tuition aspect because, of course, we have a number of children, not great numbers, but we have a small number of children who just can't go to school because of medical conditions. And this team, the Alternative Learning Progression Service, will continue to oversee that education along with that child's school.
I meant, the home tuition, some of the parents actually take this option, homeschooling themselves.
Sorry, I've got home tuition muddled up with so we still have our elective home education. So parents can still elect to home educate their children at home, which is what you're asking about. That service sits separately from this team. That's managed by another team in the education department, but it's within my area of responsibility. But that's a separate team, and we still have parents who can opt for that and do choose to opt for that, more so in the COVID period at the moment.
Thank you. Is there any other question, comment? Yeah.
So how will this restructure affect the children or will it affect the children that you currently can take under the Alternative Learning and Progression Service?
So the children who are currently under the Alternative Learning Progression Service will transfer over onto the role of the pupil referral unit, onto the role of ACE, so that ACE have the oversight. So this team will not have oversight of any other pupils other than those getting medical tuition. All other pupils, for example, being permanently excluded from school, will transfer over to ACE, our pupil referral unit.
Okay. Do we agree with the recommendations? Yeah? Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening and good evening, members. This report relates to an organisational change assessment for a part of the Cllr team, and that is the corporate affairs part, which covers finance, governance and corporate social responsibility. That's the part of the team that reports directly to me rather than to the corporate director airport. The impetus for this organisational change assessment was really the fact that I was fortunate enough to be appointed as the Service Director, London Luton Airport, which left my previous post of Airport Client Manager vacant. That's the post that I'd occupied for the preceding 15 years. And over that time, the demands of the job and the nature of the business had changed considerably, which meant that when that post became vacant, it was not appropriate to fill it in the same form. The company needs full-time finance support. It also needs full-time governance support. And whilst I was able to combine those two functions in the single post previously, it is not now possible to continue along that line. So the purpose of this restructuring was really to make the best use of the resources that the council has made available to the company through the Cllr team. And using those resources to best effect, given the challenges of the present and the opportunities of the future. It's a fairly straightforward restructuring because there are very few people involved in it. There was at the outset only one person who was at risk of redundancy, and I'm glad to say that through the process we received representations from that individual regarding the work that they're currently undertaking, which means that they have now become a slot-in for one of the new posts. So there is no redundancy as a result of these restructuring proposals. In fact, we're creating additional posts that will be available for recruitment should you decide to approve the recommendations of this report. So in terms of consultation, we started, of course, with the trades unions on the 28th of April. Formal consultation started on the 29th of April with the affected staff, with corporate directors and the Service Director, Finance, Revenues and Benefits, to whom the Airport Client Manager post had reported. There were questions, there were comments through that process, but no alternative proposals were submitted. Therefore, the proposals stand now as they did at the commencement of the exercise. I've already described the changes to the Cllr Corporate Affairs team. The restructuring also involves the transfer of a member of the team, an officer who used to report to the Airport Client Manager. That's the financial controller. And that post will report into the central finance team and will report to either the chief accountant or to his or her nominee. The current post holder is otherwise unaffected. There is no change to the grade and there's no real change to the responsibilities of that post. We propose creating 3 new posts: finance business partner to give the financial expertise that the company needs, a governance manager to ensure that it is properly managed and run in terms of its corporate governance, and a financial controller post to support the finance business manager and also to work on the corporate social responsibility area, which will involve integrated reporting, balanced scorecard, all sorts of things that will be helpful as a to us as a business in demonstrating the various forms of value that we create, not only economic, but also social and environmental. The job descriptions for the new posts have been evaluated and have been consulted on with the consultees that I mentioned earlier. There has been no change to the job descriptions as a result of that consultation. That, I think, is the report, Chair. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Hands, whichever you like to. Mead or John. Do you want to go first?
Sorry, I want to ask a question. Have I butted in at the wrong moment?
No, you can ask the question. Yes, why not?
Okay, thank you. Is there anything in this restructuring which is going to bring more control to capital projects by Cllr? Because at the moment, their record on managing capital programmes is not very good. A couple of examples: the DART was originally at 225 million, it's now 281 million and can go higher. DCO at 50 million, now running at 65 million and could go higher, etc., etc. Are we going to get control over these contracts, over this budgeting with this new structure, or is it still liable to be a free-for-all for the contractor?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure that I would agree with Councillor Mead's comments in that respect, but I can assure him that having a full-time finance officer within the corporate affairs team of Cllr should absolutely introduce that additional level of control which will help to manage those projects.
I have to declare an interest, obviously, being a director of the airport. Am I allowed to ask questions?
I am actually also on the airport.
Okay.
My advice to you, Chair, as interim monitoring officer, is that you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
I can go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
It really goes on from what Councillor Mead was saying, but like you, I probably more disagree with what actually comments he was making. But the increased complexity of Cllr, I mean, I joined the board 6 years ago, and it now really is kind of a very, very complex business. My real concern is that we've produced all these new positions, and are we confident that we have enough senior staff now to move forward in a positive way and not find ourselves with various hiccups along the way?
Chair, I think very much that this report contributes to ensuring that there is a robust team in place to deal with the issues that Councillor Young has referred to. It is the case that the company has become increasingly complex in its business affairs and in its organisation, and the resourcing of that has perhaps not kept pace with that increasing complexity. And that is why in my introduction to this report I did say that we must ensure that the resources that we have are properly used and used to best effect to make sure that the company is well run.
And if I'm allowed, Chair, a second question. You're deleting the position of risk manager, which tends to, I don't know, risk manager I would thought would be a most important person to actually look at a project and say, this is the sort of risk, because the people putting forward most projects tend to be, shall we say, kind to themselves because they want the project to go ahead. And I presume a risk manager would kind of look at it and say, are the real risks much higher, or in some cases maybe even lower?
Councillor Young is absolutely right, Chair. A risk management function is critical. We have never actually been able to fill this post at the grade, despite the fact that we've advertised it on a number of occasions. And therefore, it is a wasted resource at the moment. But we have procured our risk management support and advice
Thank you.
First of all, a statement. I think adding in a full-time finance partner and so on, and a new governance manager as specific roles, I think is welcome, to be honest. Just a little query. You've got the post title down as finance business partner. That seems a little strange, because normally when I see partner, it doesn't actually say to me a person who is permanently employed. It is often the way that somebody external who's brought in and is not permanent is hidden in a structure. Could you comment on that for me?
That is the job title that is used for the council's own senior finance officers. Colleagues in the council's finance service, Darren and Atif, are called finance business partner. So it's following that precedent.
Okay, but Dev Gopal, for example, isn't called a partner, is he?
No, he isn't. But these posts are not. This post is not equivalent to Dev Gopal. It is graded at M8, which is the grade for a finance business partner within the council.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark, is that the client manager, the previous post, airport client manager, and now I think it was previously service director, isn't it? There was a service director, finance and audit, which was you. No?
No, I regret to say I've never had that honour, Chair. The service director, finance and audit, was Dev Gopal before his title was changed to service director, finance, revenues and benefits. I was the airport client manager. I am now the service director for London Luton Airport Limited. The airport client manager post is vacant.
Okay. So that post has been deleted now, service director, finance and audit.
It was altered through the senior management restructure that was approved last year.
Okay. So there is a difference of £27,000, which the council doesn't have to meet that, but the airport will have.
Not at all, Chair. The council is fully reimbursed with a management fee on top for the services it provides to the company.
Okay. There are no any further questions? No? Okay, that's the proposal. So, does this committee approve the recommendation to approve the deletion and creation of posts as set out in the OCA for London Luton Airport Limited?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed?
Approve.
Okay. Thank you.
Many thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
members.
Bye-bye. Okay. The next one is teacher recruitment. 11.
Good evening, councillors. This, I think, should be a very simple report for colleagues to go through. The Teacher Recruitment and Workforce Development Service is now a very small service consisting of one person. We are no longer going to be offering that service as it is now covered by the responsibilities of the Teaching School Hub, which is a new initiative run by the DFE, which Chiltern Learning Trust has been successful in being awarded. So we're very proud that Chiltern is our regional teaching school hub. They will now, as part of that role, take on the recruitment and the induction of teachers. The service consists currently of one full-time officer. Because the workload in the service has been reducing over the last few years, that officer has really been focusing significantly on governor services in relation to recruitment of head teachers, which is really the only part of teacher recruitment that the local authority is now involved in. So whilst this service as a whole is being delivered by the Teaching School Hub, and therefore we're looking to do this OCA, which will result in a redundancy of this officer, we were really keen to replace this officer with a separate post who will be able to look after the head teacher recruitment as and when that is needed. So it's been through all of the consultation process. The colleague is keen to take voluntary redundancy. There have been no alternatives put forward, and so I would request that the OCA is agreed. Thank you. Open to any questions.
Okay. Any comments? As you said in the outset, it's a straightforward, simple, and we simply actually agree this report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a novice. So, first of all, apologies. I am recovering from a chest and sinus infection. So if I start coughing, it's not COVID. I've been tested. I'm negative. But I do cough a lot at the moment, so apologies in advance. So I'm here to discuss redundancy and leavers figures for the previous year, so April 2020 up until end of March 2021. So between those dates, there's been extraordinary changes in the council, as you're aware. So I've done a comparison over the last 3 years, so 2018, 2019 and 2020, so that you can see just how it's changed since COVID. So, for example, in 2018, 2019, about 5% of all our leavers were due to redundancies or TUPE, so a very, very low number. And the exact numbers are in the appendix if you want to refer to them. In the following year, so 2019-2020, about 20% left due to redundancies and GP, so it did go up a bit. And then in the last year, 2020 to 21, 44% of all leavers were due to redundancy or GP. It is worth pointing out, though, that half of all of those redundancies were voluntary as a result of our VSS scheme, the voluntary separation scheme that we had open for a period of time last year. So in the previous years, there was, I think I reported to you earlier this year from home, and I told you that we had a higher proportion of male being made redundant last year, the year before last year. So 61% were men, which compared to the council average of 33% men was very high. However, I'm pleased to say, well, I suppose, pleased to say that this year it has evened itself out again, so that's no longer a concern. It was just a one-off. So this year, numbers were mirroring the gender representation of the council. Apart from the increase in redundancies and GP transfers, resignations and dismissals have also significantly reduced over the last 3 years. So in 2020, so the previous year, only 34% of leavers were due to resignations, compared to 67% the year before that, in 2018, and 68% the year before that, so in 2019. So it's almost halved compared to the last 2 years, which is quite significant. Similar to last year, we only had 9% retirements, compared to 14% in 2018-2019. So I think the impact of the pandemic and the emergency budget cuts that was introduced has most likely led to reduced job security, hence less resignations. So in other words, people are not as willing to move jobs in this time. We've noticed that dismissals for ill health, capability and disciplinary have all been reduced, not massively, but by just under 2% respectively since the previous year. And this may be a result of doing less disciplinary hearings during the start and the height of the pandemic. We were basically not engaging in disciplinaries in the first couple of months when COVID broke, because we didn't have the infrastructure set up to do them virtually. Another statistically significant finding by comparing the data over the last 3 years is that ill health dismissals have reduced in the last year, with less than 1% ill health dismissal compared to 3% the year before that and 2% in 2020-2021. And I can only assume that it's because more people are working from home with better work-life balance, increased flexibility, which has resulted in sickness absence not being as high, or at least not as impactful on the service. So therefore less action has been taken by management. Having analysed the reasons for leaving for those who did resign, majority of people, so 36%, left the council either due to looking for a better opportunity or wanting to change their career. 13% left because they wanted better pay and working conditions, and interestingly, another 13% left to give up work, but not for retirement, which I think is quite an interesting figure, that people would choose to leave work, but not for retiring. It's quite high. On the whole, as expected, redundancies and GP transfers have increased, but all other leavers' reasons have decreased or stayed just below or about the same as the previous years. So moving on to the IIA, the demographics of our leavers. I've made it quite clear. So in terms of age, the proportion of leavers this last year has been fairly distributed. There's no age group significantly higher than another in terms of leavers, apart from the under 35s, which makes up less than 20% of the leavers. In terms of sex, this year the amount of women compared to men leaving the council is representative of the council's makeup of 76% female and 23% male leavers. Sexual orientation, out of all leavers in 2020-2021, 60% identify themselves as heterosexual and less than 2% as LGBT. Unfortunately, as you are aware, a third we were unable to analyse a third of the leavers' sexual orientation because we do not have the data, either because they preferred not to give it to us, or because, we haven't received it. And there is, I think, another project underway by Andrew Williams in HR in terms of trying to minimise that gap. But so far, that's not impacted the figures, unfortunately. In terms of race, in 2020-2021, half of all the leavers were white and 18% classified as BME. Again, a third of the leavers either declined to specify or we don't know their race, making it quite difficult to analyse this data or draw any conclusions from it. Religion, so just over a third of all leavers in the last financial year were Christian, 15% had no religion, 8% were Muslim, and apart from the 34% who didn't decline, who didn't specify or decline to say, we don't know the religion of the remaining 9%. We don't know their religion, but the remaining 9% are spread out between all other religious groups. Disability, over half the leavers reported having no disability and 6% reported having a disability. Unfortunately, nearly 40% of the leavers declined to specify, or we don't know if they have a disability, making it difficult to analyse or draw conclusions. But as I've mentioned, there is currently work undergoing in HR to reduce this gap. Any questions?
From the members? I have a couple of questions. One is, the paragraph 6. How did you actually get this data?
I get it from we have a system called iTrend. It's our HR system where when somebody joins the council, there's a team in HR who extracts their data from their application forms and puts it onto iTrend. But staff members have also got the opportunity to log in themselves into self-service and update their details if they want to or change them. So that data is held in a database, and when I do these reports, I need to request the data from Civica. Does that answer your question?
How the Civica actually got these questions answered, because you are actually mentioning in the report the exit interviews are not taking place as that should have been successfully. The religion, disability, there are a high proportion of the people, the employee not actually participating or declaring anything. So how did you get, that's why my point, how did you get the data?
Yes, no, it's from the self-service system in our HR software. That's where the data is extracted from.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Leavers 2020-2021 compared to previous years,
yeah.
18-19. I've been reading this. The redundancies are more than the previous years this year.
Yes.
So, was there any certain reason of that?
The reasons are because in July, about a year ago now, we introduced the emergency budget, which meant we embarked on a number of OCAs, as I'm sure you're aware, because they would have all passed you here, which has left us with a large amount of redundancies and voluntary redundancies. That's the reason for the influx. It was a necessary mean to achieve the financial targets set.
With regards to the gender, it says 76% of female were leavers. I think you mentioned that it was balanced this year, but what was the reasons behind that? Do we know why there was a higher increase in women?
This year, why the
It's
female leavers were higher?
76% leavers.
So that's in line with how many women work in the council. So that's actually good. I know it sounds quite high, but we have got 70% women working in the council. So that means it's representative of the makeup of the council. But the year before, it was the opposite. So it was a lot more men being made redundant than women, which wasn't in balance with the makeup of the council. So if that trend had carried on, it would be a concern potentially. But it hasn't, it was a one-off. So I'm just mentioning that we are now back in line with how it should look. No problem.
Any further questions? Question.
There's a general question, not really covered in the report. I retired 11 years ago, so I'm a bit out of touch with the labour market at the moment. How does the public sector, Luton in particular, compare with the private sector, with like-for-like wages, perks, benefits and things like this? Are we competitive with the private sector?
I think we are, yes. I used to work for, I've worked for charities, I've worked for Network Rail, so quite different industries, and I must say I think Luton stacks up very well compared to other, I mean clearly not banking and the sort of, yes exactly, but yes, no, if you compare it to other not-for-profit organisations, I think we do quite well in that sense. Okay. Yeah. Pension is clearly very good. We've got a lot of initiatives focusing on health and well-being, very flexible in terms of working arrangements. We have good maternity and paternity rights. So I think we are doing quite well in that sense, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more question from me is paragraph 5. It's are there any differences, or what are the differences in ill health dismissals and disciplinary dismissals? What is the end objective?
Sorry, what differences in terms of ill health dismissals and what?
Disciplinary dismissal.
Disciplinary dismissals. The difference in numbers. Do you mean what's the difference in numbers? Yes. So it will be.
What are the consequences of that?
Right. So if you're dismissed based on ill health, there's two types. There's ill health redundancy, which the pension decides, which is quite rare. Then there's ill health dismissal because somebody has been on a long-term sick from the council. In terms of the difference between that and being dismissed based on disciplinary, it's quite, it's a much longer process for ones. We would get occupational health input into that. We would have medical input into that. I'm not sure if you're asking the process or the...
I am aware of the process. I think you must have exhausted all those options
yes,
which you have sent. But I think you hinted about the ill health is the pension decides that.
Yes.
So that's the only thing.
Well, yeah, I'm not quite sure in terms of how to answer that, because it's two completely different processes that we would use if somebody's dismissed based on disciplinary because they've committed misconduct or even gross misconduct. You know, they wouldn't be getting notice pay, that sort of thing, potentially. Whereas if it's because of ill health, you know, they would be treated, obviously, with, you know, they would be getting their notice pay, they would be getting any other entitlements that they should be getting. So it's two totally different processes that can't really, you know, you can't compare them like for like.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, do we note the report? And, sorry, you want to ask a question? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. You know, this report is regarding diversity statistics of those who left the council.
Pardon,
Yeah.
I couldn't hear.
Yeah.
What was that?
No, that's fine. This is not my question. But this report is in regards of people who left the council.
Yes.
So can we have the report in future who joined the council in terms of diversity, you know, diversity and equality basis?
So you want to know, for, in the last year, all the people who joined the council, what is their sort of IIAs, essentially, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc. Is that what you're asking for? Yeah.
I think basically he's asking for the, you know, the report you have presented this time.
Yeah.
You know, the redundancies and the levers of the council, but I think he's asking about the joining the council.
Yeah, that's no problem. I don't see a problem with that.
And that next one.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be next year now, because we do these once a year, but I'll make sure to add it. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you. Do we agree with the recommendation and support the process which is ongoing about equality and diversity? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think I was meant to also go through the work programme on behalf of Aidan Wilkie. He couldn't make it today. So I've been reined in last minute to do that. Shall I do that now, or do I?
Yes, we are going to do the next one.
Okay.
Yes, we start the work program. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So there was a few things I was asked to tell you about on the work programme. So in my report, I mentioned that there was some work underway by Andrew Williams in HR on reducing the gap of missing data, sensitive data. So that's at the end. If you go to the end of the work programme, it's right at the bottom. It says date to be agreed. I spoke to him yesterday, and he thinks he should have that finalised end of July, August time. So perhaps to add it into the is there a September work programme? There's a September meeting, isn't there? 30th of September.
So which one in September one?
Meeting day 30th of September. Do we know?
Yeah, there are two meetings in September.
Yeah.
So I don't know which.
6th of September and 30th of September.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
So which one you want? 30th of September.
Which one is less busy?
Well, the 6th has nothing at all.
So let's do that then, maybe, yeah?
So if there is only one item.
So maybe we can move on to the next one, 30th.
30th, I think. The 6th has nothing. So there's
Okay.
one item. It's not really. That's only got two items.
Yeah, I'll let him know. Okay. I was also asked to let you know that the Customer Services Operating Model OCA has now moved to the 30th of September instead of 14th of July. and I've been asked to let you know that the domestic abuse guidelines update has been added to the 17th of July. 14th of July, sorry. Yes, 14th of July meeting as well. That's all my updates.
Is that anything else members want to bring in?
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the business of this meeting tonight. Thank you very much and have a safe journey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.